The rain hadn't stopped since dawn. Thick sheets of water blurred the windows of the train as it snaked its way through the hills heading west. I sat alone in car 7, my backpack resting on my lap, my fingers tracing the edge of a worn leather strap. People around me scrolled on their phones, whispered to loved ones, or stared blankly at the gray sky. No one paid attention to me. That's how I liked it. I've learned that most of the time, people only see what they expect to see. A quiet woman in her 40s, tired eyes jacket zipped up to her chin. Just another passenger traveling cross-country. But I wasn't always like this. Once the sky was my home. I used to be a pilot. Not a commercial one, no. I wore a uniform with wings pinned to my chest. I trained in cockpits that rattled with power, climbed through clouds like they were staircases to heaven, and believed I belonged up there. But that was 6 years ago, 6 years since I walked away from everything I thought I'd become. Since I quit the Air National Guard, stuffed my flight suit into a box, and told myself I was done with flying. Most people assume that when someone gives up a dream like that, it's because they weren't good enough. That wasn't the case for me. I could fly. I was damn good at it. But skill means nothing if you can't handle the weight that comes with it. There are moments, split seconds, that separate pilots who make it from those who don't. I froze in one of those moments. We were running an emergency drill in the simulator. Hydraulic failure smoke in the cabin. Alarm screaming in my ears. I panicked. My instructor barked commands. My hands shook. I hesitated, and in the simulation we crashed. I can still hear his voice in the debriefing room. Calm, almost pitying. "Claire, you have the technical skill, but you're too emotional. You're not cut out for split-second decisions." That broke me more than I let on, so I left. I took a job in logistics, traded the roar of engines for the hum of office lights, and swore I'd never set foot in a cockpit again. Now here I was. Just a woman on a train, staring out at a drenched landscape as we crossed an old steel bridge over a raging river. The rain tapped harder on the glass. Somewhere in the distance, thunder growled low like a warning. I shifted in my seat and caught my reflection in the window. For a second, I almost didn't recognize her, the woman staring back. I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to be thinking about the past. This was just another trip. Nothing more. At least that's what I told myself. The train rattled gently as it crossed the steel bridge, the sound of rain mixing with the low hum of wheels on track. I shifted in my seat and reached into my jacket pocket, fingers brushing against something cold and metallic. It was still there. A small silver ring, molded in the shape of tiny wings, wrapping around my finger. I slipped it out and let it rest in my palm. The edges were worn smooth from years of fiddling the faint engravings, almost invisible now. This ring used to mean something. Back when it was pinned to a velvet cushion and handed to me at graduation. Wings, for the ones who earn the sky, they told us. Funny how heavy a little piece of silver can feel once you've fallen from where it came. Is that an angel ring? The voice pulled me from my thoughts. I looked up and saw a girl, maybe 8 years old, standing in the aisle, clutching a stuffed rabbit to her chest. Her mother was a few seats back, dozing with her head against the window. The girl's eyes were wide, curious. "It looks like angel wings," she said again, pointing. I forced a small smile. Something like that. "Are you an angel?" she asked innocently. I shook my head. "Not even close." "Then why do you wear it?" I hesitated. "Because I used to fly, like a pilot, Yeah. Her face lit up. Wow, that's so cool. Did you fly big planes? Did you go upside down? I felt a pang deep in my chest. I flew small ones. And yes, sometimes upside down. She giggled. I want to be a pilot someday, but my brother says girls can't be pilots. I looked at her for a long moment. Your brother's wrong, I said softly. Her smile grew even wider, but before she could ask more, her mother stirred and called her back. Bye, Angel Pilot, she whispered, skipping back to her seat. I turned the ring over in my hand and slipped it back into my pocket. She reminded me of someone. Me, maybe. Back when I believed wings were forever. The train gave a sudden shudder. It wasn't much, barely more than a hiccup in the steady rhythm, but I felt it in my bones. The kind of shift only someone tuned to machinery notices. The air vents above me rattled faintly. Somewhere farther ahead, a soft metallic squeal echoed through the cars, like steel grinding against steel. No one else seemed to notice. A man in the next row muttered about the Wi-Fi cutting out. A conductor strolled past, checking tickets, with the same bored expression. But the sound lingered in my ears. It was probably nothing. Trains groan and creak all the time. Still, my fingers brushed against the ring in my pocket again. For reasons I couldn't explain, I felt my stomach knot. The train swayed again. It was subtle, just a faint, unexpected shimmy beneath my feet, but my fingers tightened on the armrest anyway. To anyone else, it probably felt like nothing. Just the natural rock and roll of a heavy train as it carved its way through rain-soaked hills. But to me, it was wrong. Planes teach you to listen, to feel the vibrations, the pitch of an engine, the shift of air over metal. Every sound carries meaning if you know how to hear it, and right now, the sound I heard was not routine. There it was again, a low, dragging groan, metal on metal, stretching too long before fading. My stomach tightened. I turned my head, scanning the faces around me. Most passengers were unbothered. A couple laughed softly over a phone screen. The man across the aisle had slipped into a light snore. A flight attendant, no, a conductor, strolled past with practiced calm. They didn't hear it. Or they didn't recognize it. I wanted to believe it was nothing. Trains make noises. Screeches, groans. Thuds, they're normal. But the voice inside me, the one I had tried to bury 6 years ago, whispered, "Pay attention." My thumb brushed the outline of the winged ring still hidden in my jacket pocket. Not now, I told myself. You're not in charge here. You're not responsible for anyone on this train. But my body didn't believe me. The muscles in my shoulders coiled tight. My pulse ticked up, not from fear, but from the familiar hum of alertness that used to flood through me in a cockpit. The conductor passed again, smiling politely, as he checked tickets. I caught his eye, and almost asked, "Is everything okay up front?" But the words stuck in my throat. What would I even say? That I used to be a pilot, and I heard a sound that made my gut twist, that wouldn't help anyone. I let him walk on. The rain outside lashed harder against the glass. We were entering a stretch of elevated track, now the kind that curved high above a river gorge. Gray water churned below, swollen with days of storm runoff. The train tilted gently into the curve. And then it happened. A sudden jolt sharper than the ones before. The lights flickered overhead. Coffee sloshed from a paper cup onto the floor. A few passengers gasped and reached for their armrests. My hands clenched tight. The vibrations settled again, but my heart didn't. This wasn't turbulence. This wasn't normal. I stared down the length of the car toward the door leading to the next cabin. The hum of the engine felt uneven. Something inside me screamed to get up, to find the conductor, to do something. But I stayed in my seat. I wasn't the one in charge anymore. That's what I kept telling myself. I told myself to breathe. It was probably nothing, just a shudder in the track or the train adjusting to a change in grade. That's what I wanted to believe. But my body didn't buy it. I felt the vibrations again, faint but irregular, like a heart skipping beats. I turned in my seat, scanning the aisle. A conductor stood near the end of the car, his tablet clutched a little too tightly. His eyes darted toward the front of the train, then back to the passengers as if checking for signs of panic. When he noticed me watching, he forced a tight smile and adjusted his tie. That smile wasn't real. You don't spend hundreds of hours in cockpits without learning how to read people under stress. It's not just about the machines. It's about the faces around you. The slight tremor in someone's hand, the clipped edge in their voice. The conductor's expression was polite, but his knuckles were white on the tablet. He knows something's wrong. I felt my pulse tick faster. Not now, Claire. You're not a pilot anymore. But I couldn't stop the flood of memories. I was 28, sitting in the cockpit of an F-16 simulator, sweat running down my spine. Hydraulic failure fire in the port engine, my instructor barked. You have 30 seconds. What's your move? Alarm screamed in my headset. My fingers hovered over the controls, frozen. My brain spun in circles trying to calculate. Claire, decide, he snapped. I hesitated. Too long. The simulation ended in a crash sequence. The screens went black. I sat there shaking. In the debriefing room, my instructor didn't even raise his voice. You've got technical skill, he said calmly, but under pressure you freeze. Flying is about instinct, split-second decisions. I don't think you're built for that. Those words carved themselves into my chest. I quit, a month later. The train lurched again, yanking me back to the present. A few passengers murmured nervously. The mother across the aisle clutched her daughter's hand, whispering reassurances neither of them believed. The conductor tapped his tablet harder than necessary, his forced smile slipping. Something's wrong. I could feel it in my bones, the same way I used to sense a storm in the air, even before radar picked it up. The ring in my pocket seemed to burn against my fingers. Get up, Claire. I clenched my jaw. No, not yet. I wasn't going to rush into a situation that wasn't mine to fix. That's what I told myself. But deep down, I knew if things got worse, I wouldn't have a choice. It started with a sound, not the faint groan of steel I'd heard earlier, but a sharp, violent bang that echoed through the cars like a cannon blast. The floor lurched under me. Coffee cups toppled, bags tumbled from overhead racks. A man standing near the restroom slammed into the doorframe with a curse. And then the train tilted. Not much at first, just a few degrees, but enough to send people sliding sideways in their seats. Someone screamed. The lights flickered, dimmed, and then steadied again in an eerie amber glow. My hands clutched the armrests so tightly my knuckles ached. The hum beneath my feet felt wrong now, stuttering uneven. Mommy. The voice snapped my attention sideways. The little girl with the stuffed rabbit. Her eyes wide, her small fingers gripping her mother's sleeve in terror. It's okay, baby, her mother whispered, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. The girl's gaze met mine, and I saw it there, raw, unfiltered fear. the kind of fear I remembered feeling once years ago in a cockpit full of alarms I couldn't silence. A shout came from farther up the car. Is there anyone here with technical training medical? Anything heads turned. The voice belonged to a man with close-cropped gray hair and broad shoulders that hadn't softened with age. He was steady on his feet. Despite the tilt of the train, his hand braced against the wall as he scanned the passengers. A retired soldier, I guessed. Maybe even higher. He had that commanding presence you couldn't fake. "We need someone who understands engines or hydraulics," he called again. No one answered. The conductor had disappeared forward, leaving the car unnervingly silent, except for the soft whimper of a child. My stomach churned. This was it. The moment. Every instinct I'd tried to bury for 6 years clawed its way to the surface. I knew what that sound meant. I knew what a machine felt like when it was in trouble. I knew even if no one else did. "Get up, Claire." But my legs stayed frozen. Not again, my mind screamed. "You're not built for this. You don't belong in a crisis." The gray-haired man's eyes swept the car once more, and this time they landed on me. "You," he said firmly. "You look like you know something. Do you?" I opened my mouth. The words caught in my throat. Do I tell him? Do I admit I used to fly? The girl with the rabbit was still staring at me, her tiny chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. "You're not cut out for pressure." The voice from my past echoed in my skull. But pressure was here now, and I couldn't escape it. My palms were slick with sweat. The gray-haired man's eyes stayed locked on me, sharp and assessing. The kind of gaze that didn't beg for answers. It demanded them. "You," he said again. "Do you know something I swallowed hard?" "Yes." "No, I don't." The words tangled in my throat. I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to get involved. I reached into my pocket and felt the cool, familiar curve of the ring. The wings pressed against my skin like a silent rebuke. I thought I had left this part of me behind. "6 years ago, I'd sat frozen in a simulator while alarms blared and smoke filled the virtual cockpit. "Donovan, make a decision," my instructor barked. My fingers hovered over the controls, but my brain spun like a compass gone haywire. 1 beat, 2, too long. The screen flashed red. A flat computerized voice announced impact. All systems failed. Later in the debriefing room, he didn't even raise his voice. "You're a skilled pilot," he said, almost gently. "But when the heat's on, you hesitate. And that's when people die." I walked out of that room and never touched a yoke again. Now, as the train tilted under my feet and the child with the rabbit whimpered in her mother's arms, I heard his words in my head. "You're not cut out for pressure." But wasn't this pressure? Wasn't this the moment I had failed to meet, before I gripped the ring so tightly, the tiny wings dug into my palm? The man's voice broke through my haze. I served 25 years in the Army. I know the look of someone who's holding back. If you know something, say it. The car went silent. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. I could stay quiet. Let someone else step up. Let someone else carry the weight if it all went wrong. But no one else was stepping up. No one else could feel the sick pitch of the engine, the uneven vibrations that only a pilot would recognize. It had to be me. I used to fly. I said finally, my voice low but steady. I was Air National Guard, certified, but it's been years. The man's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his stance. "You're still more qualified than anyone here," he said. "Come with me." I slipped the ring onto my finger and stood. My legs felt surprisingly steady as I followed him down the aisle, past wide-eyed passengers clutching their seats. The aisle felt longer than it should have. Every step I took was a battle against the tilt of the train, against the voices in my head, telling me to sit back down. The car swayed violently to the left, throwing me against a seat back. A man grabbed his wife's hand and whispered something sharp. Is she crazy? Where's she going? I ignored him. The gray-haired man, he hadn't even told me his name, kept moving ahead of me, one hand gripping the rail above. He turned back briefly and barked, "Stay close. Watch your footing." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. The lights overhead flickered again, dimming to an eerie orange glow, before snapping back to harsh white. Behind me, a baby wailed. Someone shouted for help. Luggage tumbled from an overhead rack and slammed into the floor with a sickening thud. The smell of coffee and fear hung in the air. The tilt of the floor made it feel like I was climbing a steep hill. Each step forward sent my boots sliding against the slick linoleum. My hand shot out to grab a pole, just as the train lurched again. "Watch it," the man ahead warned. A young woman huddled on the floor with her arms around two small children. Her eyes were glassy, her lips moving in a whisper I couldn't hear. "Stay down," I told her softly as I passed. She nodded, tears streaking her cheeks. The farther forward we went, the louder the sounds became. A metallic screech echoed from somewhere deep in the machinery. The low hum of the engine stuttered like a heart, out of rhythm. I felt it in my bones. This wasn't just turbulence. This was failure. This train is dying. When we reached the door to the next car, I hesitated for a beat. What if I couldn't help? What if I froze again like I had in the simulator all those years ago? The ring on my finger pressed tight against my skin. No time for doubts now. I pushed through the door. The next car was chaos. People were out of their seats, shouting over one another. A man pounded on a locked side door, demanding to be let off as if there were anywhere to go. "Sit down," someone screamed. "Everyone needs to sit down." No one listened. The train jolted hard. A suitcase skidded down the aisle and slammed into a man's shins, sending him sprawling. I braced myself against the wall and kept moving. Ahead, the door to the cabin loomed like a portal to another world. The man leading me turned and gave a grim nod. "Ready?" he asked. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. Each step toward the cabin felt heavier than the last. My boots slid against the tilted floor as the train groaned like some wounded animal. Ahead, the gray-haired man gripped the door handle tight, bracing himself as another violent jolt rocked the car. "Almost there," he said without turning, but my mind wasn't fully in the present anymore. I was back in that cockpit. The simulator's screen blazed red as alarms screamed in my headset. Hydraulic failure, smoke in the cabin, fire warning on the left engine. "Claire." My instructor barked. "What's your move?" My fingers hovered uselessly over the controls. Sweat beaded on my forehead. The oxygen mask felt too tight, the air too thin. Donovan decided I froze. The altimeter ticked downward. The virtual horizon tilted dangerously. "Claire, You're killing us. As the screen went black, a flat, cold voice filled the silence. Simulation failed. All crew lost. I ripped off the headset with trembling hands. The debriefing room was even colder than the simulator. My instructor didn't yell. That would have been easier. He just folded his arms and looked at me with tired eyes. "You're a skilled pilot," he said slowly, like each word was a burden. "But you don't have the instincts. When pressure hits, you freeze. And in this job, freezing gets people killed." His words didn't shout. They sliced. "You're not built to save lives, Donovan." Ting. The memory tightened around my chest, like a vice as I stumbled forward. The lights above flickered, cutting in and out like a failing heartbeat. Maybe he was right, I thought. Maybe I'm not built for this. But then I saw her. The little girl with the stuffed rabbit crouched in her seat, 3 cars back, clinging to her mother. Her wide eyes locked on mine, as if she could still see me through the chaos. And in that look, I saw something I hadn't felt in years. Someone was depending on me. The gray-haired man slammed his shoulder against the cabin door. It gave with a metallic screech, opening to a rush of hot air, and the sharp smell of burning wires. He glanced back at me. "You're up," he said simply. I stared into the darkness beyond the door, where red warning lights blinked like the eyes of some waiting predator. My legs shook, but they carried me forward anyway. The smell hit me first. Burnt plastic, scorched wiring thick and acrid, clawing at my throat as I stepped into the cabin. Red lights flashed across the console in chaotic rhythm. Warnings blared, overlapping in a metallic chorus. System failure. Brake override offline. Engine fault detected. My eyes swept the space in one sharp, practiced motion. The conductor, the one who had smiled so tightly before, was slumped in the captain's chair, his head lolling to one side. Blood trickled from a gash on his temple. His chest rose and fell shallow but steady. Next to him, a younger man sat stiffly in the co-pilot's seat, hands white-knuckled on the armrests. His breathing came in short, panicked bursts. I don't know what to do," he stammered as I entered. "The systems are down. The brakes aren't responding." I tried switching to emergency power, but his words broke apart in a choked sob. I gripped the back of his chair, forcing my voice calm. "Hey, look at me." His eyes flicked to mine, wide and glassy. "You're doing the best you can. But you need to move now so I can take a look." "I can't." "Yes, you can," I said firmly. "Get up." Something in my tone must have cut through the fog. His hands loosened. His body uncoiled just enough for me to guide him gently out of the seat. I slid in. The leather was hot beneath me, sticky with sweat. The console before me was a mess of flickering screens and sputtering lights. I ran my fingers over the controls, scanning for anything salvageable. Half the systems were unresponsive. Brake override offline. Power distribution fluctuating. Emergency hydraulics inactive. The main screen pulsed angrily. Critical failure. For a moment, I froze. The alarms, the flash and lights, they pulled me straight back into that simulator. Hydraulics out. Engine failure. Donovan decided I felt the familiar panic claw at my chest. My hand brushed against the ring on my finger. I gripped it tight, the tiny wings pressing into my skin. That was then. This is now. I took a slow breath. Okay, I muttered under my breath. Let's figure out what's still alive on this thing. The co-pilot hovered near the door, trembling. Can you save us? He whispered. I didn't look up. Not yet. But I'm going to try. The cabin vibrated like a dying animal. Every alarm felt louder, every red light sharper, every second heavier than the last. My fingers flew over the controls, flicking switches, testing circuits. Half the systems were dead. The other half were flickering on the edge of collapse. Emergency brakes aren't responding, I muttered. Hydraulics are shot. We're riding momentum. The co-pilot clutched the doorframe behind me. What does that mean? It means I said tightly, we're a 400-ton bullet on a downhill track. I scanned the console again, searching for any lifeline. There, a faint, flickering readout for an auxiliary circuit buried deep in the system. If I could reroute power through it, there was a chance, just a chance, I could manually engage the brake system. It wouldn't be pretty. And if I failed? I pushed that thought aside. Listen carefully, I told the co-pilot. There's an auxiliary circuit. If I can get power flowing through it, we might get the brakes online. Might I said might. It's either this or we ride straight off the track. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. What do you need me to do? Hold this panel open, I instructed, nodding to a side hatch near the floor. And pray this thing doesn't fry us both. Shendate. I yanked the hatch open and stared at the mess of wires inside. Heat rolled out in waves. Some of the insulation was charred, melted into dark, sticky clumps. Damn it, I whispered. Reaching into my pocket, I felt the cool metal of the ring. The wings pressed against my skin like a tether to sanity. I tightened my grip and exhaled. You've done harder things than this, Claire. Focus. I tore a length of stripped wire from a spare bundle and began to splice connections. Sparks snapped at my fingertips. The smell of ozone filled the air. Careful, the co-pilot warned. No kidding, I shot back. Another jolt shook the cabin, nearly sending me headfirst into the panel. The auxiliary circuit light flickered faintly. Come on, I whispered. Come on, damn you. I twisted the final connection into place. The cabin filled with a blinding flash as a cascade of sparks exploded from the panel. The co-pilot yelped, stumbling back. I held my ground, teeth clenched, eyes fixed on the console. And then a deep, mechanical thunk echoed beneath our feet. The auxiliary light blinked from red to yellow. Not perfect, but alive. I slammed my palm against the manual brake lever. Brakes engaged, I shouted. The train shuddered violently as the emergency system bit into the wheels. Metal screamed against metal, the sound piercing and raw. Hold on, I warned. This is going to be rough. I gripped the brake lever so hard my knuckles burned white. Come on, I muttered through clenched teeth. Don't you dare fail me now. The train screamed in protest. Steel groaned under the sudden force, the sound reverberating through my bones. The cabin shuddered violently, throwing sparks from the console as if the entire machine was ripping itself apart. Behind me, the co-pilot clung to a handrail, his face ashen. Will it hold? He shouted over the din. I don't know. I shot back. but it's the only shot we've got. The wheels shrieked against the rails. The vibration grew so intense I thought my teeth might crack. Through the cracked windshield, I saw the track plunging straight into a sharp curve ahead, a curve we wouldn't make unless we slowed down. And if the brakes failed completely. I tightened my grip on the lever. Not now. Not again. Don't freeze, Claire. Not this time. In the cars behind us, I heard shouting, crying, the sound of panic swelling like a storm. Then a piercing child's voice cut through it all. Mommy. Are we still alive? My breath caught. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I could see her in my mind, the little girl with the stuffed rabbit clutching her mother, too young to understand how close death was. Yes, sweetheart, the mother whispered hoarsely. Yes, we're alive. But her voice cracked on the last word. I focused on the console. The auxiliary circuit flickered between yellow and green. A warning light blinked furiously. Brake system overload. Failure imminent. I whispered a prayer to no one in particular. Hold on just a little longer. The train's screaming slowed. Not stopped, but slowed. The vibration eased just enough that I could unclench my jaw. Speed's dropping, I said aloud more to steady myself than anything else. Another jolt. A suitcase crashed to the floor behind us. The co-pilot's voice was barely audible over the noise. Do you think? We'll make it. I glanced at him, then back at the narrowing track ahead. We're about to find out. The sound of grinding metal filled the world. Sparks flew past the windows like angry fireflies as the emergency brakes strained against the momentum of hundreds of tons of steel. I kept my grip tight on the brake lever, refusing to let go, even though my arms screamed in protest. And then silence. The vibration under my feet slowed, until there was nothing but a faint hiss of steam and the echo of my own heartbeat in my ears. The train stopped. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Through the cracked glass of the windshield, I saw it. A sheer drop. The edge of a ravine loomed barely 3 meters ahead. Had we gone even a little farther? I clenched my jaw, forcing that thought away. We didn't. We stopped. Behind me, the co-pilot let out a ragged sob. We're still here, he whispered like he couldn't believe the words. Yes, I said softly. We are. For a moment, the world stayed frozen. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as if the entire train held its breath, afraid that the smallest sound would send us tumbling into the abyss. Then from the rear cars, a child's cry broke the silence. Not a cry of fear this time. It was relief. And suddenly, the dam burst. Passengers sobbed openly. Some laughed through their tears. A few clung to strangers as if they were lifelong friends. Applause started somewhere in the back, hesitant at first, then spreading like wildfire until the whole train roared with it. Clapping, cheering, voices raised in raw, unfiltered gratitude. I sat back in the seat, my fingers still curled around the lever. I couldn't make myself let go. Not yet. For toe sung. Through the noise, I heard a soft, trembling voice. Mommy. The angel lady saved us. I turned just enough to catch a glimpse of her, the little girl with the stuffed rabbit, peering through the cracked cabin door, her wide eyes fixed on me. Her mother pulled her close, whispering something in her ear. The gray-haired man, the one who had led me to the cabin, stood by the door, now his posture straight, despite the chaos. He gave me a slow nod. "You did it," he said quietly. I didn't answer, because even as relief washed through me, I wasn't sure I believed it yet. I didn't want to open the cabin door. For a long moment, I just sat there, hands still gripping the brake lever, staring out at the ravine ahead. The edge was so close. Too close. Behind me, voices rose soft at first, then louder. "Is it over? Are we safe?" "Yes," someone else said. She stopped it. "She saved us." My fingers loosened on the lever. Slowly, carefully, I let it go, and the cabin felt too small, the air too thick. I needed to move. When I stepped out into the aisle, the car fell silent. Dozens of faces turned toward me, some streaked with tears, others pale with shock. A young mother clutched her toddler tight, her shoulders shaking as she whispered into his hair. As I passed, she looked up. "Thank you," she said hoarsely. Her eyes glistened. "You saved us." I shook my head slightly. I'm just a passenger," I murmured. But the words felt hollow, even to me. A man in his 20s brushed past, clutching his phone like a lifeline. "You're a damn hero," he said. "Do you know that I didn't answer? I didn't feel like a hero. Suck d'afour." At the end of the car, the gray-haired man stood waiting. His posture was ramrod straight military, in every line. When I reached him, he didn't speak. He simply raised his hand in a crisp salute. The gesture caught me off guard. I hadn't seen a salute like that in years. And for a fleeting moment, I was back in uniform again, standing on a sun-baked runway, a pair of silver wings being pinned to my chest. "You didn't have to step in," he said quietly, "but you did, and 200 people are alive because of it." I stared at him, words caught in my throat. Finally, I managed to whisper, I couldn't sit still." He nodded. That's the difference between a passenger and a pilot. Behind us, the sounds of relief grew louder. Soft crying murmured prayers, even a few shaky laughs. But in that moment, the world seemed strangely still. The train was still. For the first time in what felt like hours, there was no screaming, no jolts, no alarms, just the low murmur of voices and the soft hiss of cooling metal. I leaned against the wall near the cabin door, my body trembling from adrenaline, my hands sore from gripping too tightly. But it wasn't over. Not really. The little girl with the stuffed rabbit stood a few feet away, peeking out from behind her mother's legs. Her wide eyes locked on me like they had back in the passenger car, full of questions too big for her age. I crouched down, resting my arms on my knees. "Hi again," I said gently. She didn't answer, just clutched her rabbit tighter. So I reached into my jacket pocket and felt the cool curve of metal against my fingers. The winged ring. For years, I had kept it hidden, a reminder of what I'd lost, and what I thought I could never be again. But now, holding it, I realized something. It wasn't mine to carry anymore. I opened my palm and held the ring out to her. "Do you know what this is?" Her eyes went wide. She shook her head. "It's a pair of wings," I said softly. "When I was your age, I wanted to fly more than anything in the world. And one day, someone gave me these." Her tiny fingers reached out hesitantly, but stopped. "They said I could wear them when I was ready," I continued, "when I believed I was strong enough to take the sky." Her mother's eyes shimmered as she whispered, "Go ahead, sweetie." The girl took the ring, carefully cradling it in her small hand, like it was made of glass. "Will I ever be ready?" she asked in a voice barely louder than a breath. I smiled, not the tight, guarded smile I'd worn for years, but something softer. "You will," I said. "Hai jeo no ki chao san sang bei." For a moment, there was no sound but the faint whistle of wind outside the cracked windows. Then the girl nodded solemnly and slipped the ring into the pocket of her little coat. "Thank you, angel lady," she whispered. As I stood, the gray-haired man watched me quietly. "That's quite a gift," he said. I shook my head. "It's not a gift," I murmured. "It's a promise." The platform was crowded with flashing cameras and raised microphones. Reporters shouted over one another, their words lost in the hum of idling engines and the faint creak of cooling metal. I stayed near the back, my hands buried deep in my jacket pockets. The authorities wanted me to speak, to tell the world how a civilian passenger had stopped a disaster, but I couldn't. I wasn't a hero, not in the way they wanted me to be. I didn't want the headlines. I didn't want to see my face on TV screens or hear my name shouted across talk shows. All I wanted was to disappear quietly into the night. A hand tapped my shoulder. It was the gray-haired man. "They're waiting," he said gently. "If you don't speak, they'll fill in the story for you." I shook my head. "Let them," I murmured. "This isn't my story to own." As I turned to leave, a phrase drifted through my memory, unbidden, unwelcome. "One day, you'll need those wings, Donovan." It was my instructor's voice, the last thing he ever said to me before I walked away from the air guard. At the time, I thought he was mocking me. But now, standing there on that cracked platform, I realized he hadn't been. He wasn't talking about flying. Not really. He was talking about this, the moment I'd be forced to choose to stay seated or take control. I looked down at my hand. The ring was gone, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel its weight. "Will you at least give me your name?" the man asked softly. I hesitated, then gave him a faint smile. "It doesn't matter," I said. "They won't remember it anyway." As I stepped away from the lights and the noise, I felt the wind on my face cool, clean alive. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was falling anymore. I felt steady, like maybe, just maybe, I had found my wings again. The night air smelled of rain and steel. I lingered at the edge of the platform watching the last passengers step into waiting cars, their faces still pale but alive. Behind them, the little girl with the stuffed rabbit stood close to her mother, and on her tiny finger, the winged ring glimmered faintly in the station lights. She noticed me watching. Her lips curved into the smallest of smiles the kind children give when they've been trusted with something precious. I gave her a little nod. She lifted her hand, showing me the ring, as if to say, "I'll take care of it." And for a moment, I felt lighter. The girl whispered something to her mother, then turned back to me. "Will you fly again?" she called softly. I hesitated. Maybe I said, "But today, it was your turn to carry the wings." Her eyes went wide. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned and walked toward the edge of the station where the shadows were deeper, quieter. The reporters were gone now. The gray-haired man had disappeared too, his mission complete. It was just me, the hum of distant engines, and the faint rattle of a departing train, somewhere far down the tracks. As I stepped onto the gravel path leading away, a thought flickered through my mind. For years, I believed I'd failed, believed I wasn't built for pressure, for moments that demanded more than skill. But today proved something. You don't have to wear a uniform to save lives. You don't have to sit in the captain's chair to make a difference. Sometimes all it takes is refusing to sit still when the world needs you. And the little girl's voice echoed in my memory. "Are we still alive, Mommy?" And my own voice answered back steady, "Now, yes, we are." I reached the edge of the station and paused, looking up at the sky. It stretched out wide and endless, as it always had. I'd spent years avoiding that horizon, convinced it wasn't mine anymore. But maybe it never really stopped being mine. Maybe I just needed a reason to take it back. As the train behind me hissed one last breath of steam, I felt something shift deep inside, a quiet truth I couldn't ignore anymore. I was just a passenger. But sometimes it's the passenger who has to take control. I've been thinking a lot about that day. Not the chaos or the screams, not even the moment I pulled the brake lever and felt the whole world hinge on whether the train would stop. What haunts me most is how close I came to doing nothing. How close I came to staying in my seat, telling myself, "This isn't your responsibility. You're just a passenger." That's the lie most of us tell ourselves, isn't it? We convince ourselves that someone else will step up, that someone else is better trained, stronger, braver. We let fear talk us out of acting. But here's the thing. The moment will come when no one else is there to take control. And it won't matter if you're ready. It won't matter if you feel worthy. It will only matter that you act. For years, I thought I wasn't cut out for that. I let one failure in a simulator define me. I let one voice in a debriefing room bury everything I believed about myself. "You freeze under pressure," he told me. And I believed him. I told myself I didn't belong in the sky. I didn't belong in the seat where decisions carried weight. So I left. And I carried that weight anyway. But that day on the train, when the alarms screamed, when people cried out, when I felt the pitch of steel beneath my feet and knew something was wrong, something in me woke up. It wasn't heroism. It wasn't courage. It was instinct. It was the part of me I thought I had buried. Stens. Here's what I want you to know. You'll fail. You'll freeze. You'll doubt yourself so deeply it feels like your bones might crack from holding all that fear. But none of that means you're weak. None of that means you can't rise when it matters. The truth is, bravery doesn't feel like bravery in the moment. It feels like fear. It feels like shaking hands and a racing heart, and a voice in your head screaming you can't do this, but you do it anyway. And maybe that's all bravery ever is, doing it anyway. So if you're listening to this, if you're sitting in your seat, staring at the world rushing past your window, wondering if you'll ever be enough, listen carefully. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be ready. You don't even have to believe in yourself completely. You just have to stand up when the moment comes. Maybe you're just a passenger now. I was too. But the thing about passengers is, sometimes they're the only ones left to take control. And when that happens, the world isn't asking you to be fearless. It's asking you to try. So try, because you never know how many lives might depend on it. This is Claire Donovan, and if I can find my wings again, maybe you can too.